Welcome back to the SimGeeks Podcast. We are your hosts, William Belk and David Shablack. We are joined today by Adam Cheng and Vince Grant from the Debriefing Academy. And they're going to run us through and talk about some debriefing, maybe the getting started, what it looks like, what we really should know, all the ways that we've been screwing up. So, Adam, why don't you take a minute, introduce yourself, give us your background and how you got to where you're at now.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm an emergency physician, pediatric emergency medicine, and based in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. Been on this journey for around 20 years or so, and along the way have made too many missteps to count, but hopefully learned along the way. And I guess that's where it's led me today and in our journey in the Debriefing Academy, being able to offer debriefing courses and resources to help to support people to become better simulation educators.
Vince?
Well, again, thanks for having us as well. We think peds emerge docs actually make the best debriefers. So I also happen to be a peds emerge doc. I work with Adam actually in Calgary. So we spend a lot of time together, both at work and now at play with this work we do with the Debriefing Academy. So yeah, great. Happy to be here and happy to talk about this topic.
So why don't you guys kind of start from the beginning? You know, you were taking in somebody who maybe is relatively new to simulation or is maybe ready to take that next step and improve their debriefing. What are the highlights? What is it that everybody needs to know going into this? And what are the mistakes that we're all making initially?
Because this is a scary topic for a lot of people. They don't know how to approach it. They're very nervous, or I've got a little bit of information and I think I'm pretty good at it. Like, I want to reset somebody's framework on this.
Yeah, I'll take a stab at that maybe first. I think one of the things that people really struggle with is that they're looking for a method to use or a tool to use, and they might go to a workshop or they might hear about something, might read about something in the literature, and then they think they have a method and they think that method works for everything. And I think one of the things we learn early on is that, you know what, there's lots of methods and all those methods work for different things. And so I think one of the mistakes or pitfalls people fall into is it's kind of like the hammer and the nail thing, right? And they just want to keep hitting the nail. Everything's a nail. They're just going to hit everything. And I think those are the same debriefers that sometimes we see later on that just like, this isn't working for me. Like, there's got to be other things out there. And so I think it's opening up people's mind to the fact that these are just like, we're just trying to get you to like initiate conversations with your learners, like, and just make sure that you can kind of unpack their experience with them. And a big piece of that is just having conversation. So instead of thinking as this like, oh my God, there's like this technique I heard about and it seems so complicated, it's got all these pieces to it. Really, it's just a method of getting you kind of listening to and talking to your learners.
Yeah, I mean, part of the challenge, I think, is when folks first get into debriefing, they're often taught a specific method or framework of debriefing. And then as a result, they end up adhering to that specific method in a very rigid fashion, right? And that leads to conversation that doesn't flow. It doesn't seem authentic. It seems forced at times. And what we want to do is we want to get away from that. And I'm not saying that having structure is a bad thing. I mean, I think generally speaking, within debriefing conversations, it's nice to be able to stick to some sort of structure. There are many benefits of that. But at the same time, what we want to do is we don't want people to be so rigid. We want them to be dynamic. We want them to be flexible. We want them to go with the flow and use various different conversational strategies along the way to allow the conversation to unfold in an organic fashion.
Having some sort of structure keeps the squirrels in line, like me, but also people like to do some wrong things in debrief. So having some structure would keep you from, say, lecturing in a debrief.
Right. I mean, I think having structure provides a framework, particularly if you're working with another facilitator, so you both have a common understanding of where you are and what you're trying to achieve. And even for learners who are familiar with a specific structure or framework, that familiarity helps to breed psychological safety, which in turn may help to enhance the quality of the conversation.
No, I think, Anthony, you brought up the psychological safety piece of it. How important is that in debriefing? What is it that we're looking to do and what steps can we take to make sure that we're creating a psychologically safe environment?
Well, I think it's actually crucial to the whole practice, to be honest with you, because you're asking learners to reflect on their practice and you're asking them to share that with you and reflect in the moment and share some thoughts, and you're going to share some thoughts and you're going to hopefully make them better. But they're not going to share with you if they don't feel safe. And so I think that's one of the things that's pivotal when you're even just starting simulation. It all starts with a pre-briefing and really setting the stage for a psychologically safe environment. And I will say that's something you're trying to create. So one of the pitfalls, we talk about pitfalls people are into, is they'll say like, you know what, this is a safe environment. So that's inherently unsafe to say that, because psychological safety is something you feel. So you create that and people feel it. So if you tell them it is, then essentially you're making it unsafe. So I think it's one of those things that we spend time really counseling people on different ways to create and maintain psychological safety. And then, you know what, if you breach it, how to maybe rebuild it. So that's some of the tools and stuff we like to offer in our teaching.
So instead of announcing it and talking the talk, it's more walk the walk and make them feel it rather than announcing. And because a loud megaphone makes people nervous.
Totally. And I mean, it's okay if you even say it. Like, I think it's one thing to say, like, you know what, guys, one of the things I'm trying to do today is I'm really trying to create a really kind of safe environment for you to reflect and share and really actively participate in the conversation. But I think just to tell people it's a safe environment, yeah, exactly. It makes it a bit risky.
Yeah, and oftentimes I hear that the task of building psychological safety rests in the pre-briefing, which partially it does, but once you've done that, it doesn't mean you're done with the job. So the things that you do and say during the simulation and the things that are carried through that you do and say in the debriefing may influence the participant's perception of psychological safety. And so we need to be constantly aware of this concept. We need to be mindful of the words and the phrases that we use, our tone of voice, our body language, because all of that together influences the learner's perception of psychological safety.
And body language is a good point because you can roll your eyes without rolling your eyes. And people feel that and people know that.
Yeah, well, I mean, oftentimes I'll sometimes practice a speech in the mirror just to see what my facial expressions are, because you can't really see what you're doing with your face unless you're in front of a mirror. And all of us have these little tendencies. Right? And so we can get feedback from our colleagues. That's one great way to point out our tendencies. The other way is to practice, deliver in front of a mirror so you can see what your face is doing in certain instances. And just being more mindful of your body language helps you in turn facilitate better conversations and debriefings.
Now, you guys both, I mean, obviously the Debriefing Academy, you have debriefing courses. You're now talking about practicing in front of a mirror. Is there value in recording debriefings and playing that back, almost debriefing the debriefing with our educators?
I think that however you're going to assess your debriefing methods becomes crucial to your own growth as a debriefer. So as Adam was pointing out, that could be like learner assessments of your performance. It could be peers that are watching you, or it could be you watching yourself. So mirror is one way, but another way, like you mentioned, is recording. None of us know our tells. You know, all of those things that we do, like only the people closest to us who talk with us all the time know what facial expressions are, our tells are, right? Like we go to the card sense. So one of the ways to see that is to record yourself and watch and just see how people react to that. And you'll be surprised the nonverbal is not just facial expressions. It's the way you sit, your tone, your arms, your legs. It sends a powerful message. And so I think this is what makes debriefing so great, because it's so complex and there's so many things that go into it, but you can parse it apart in a way that you can like really understand yourself and, you know, where you can improve as a debriefer.
Yeah, I'll just build on that by saying oftentimes if you're looking at a video of yourself, it's helpful to know what you're looking for, right? So maybe you're looking for certain pieces of body language or your tone of voice, the language that you're using, how you're phrasing your questions, your structure, how you're interacting with the learners, et cetera, et cetera. So many different things that you can look for to help to identify areas for improvement. And so what we've done is we've created a whole set of resources, checklists, and tools to help to guide that reflection. Whether you're doing self-reflection or whether you're with a colleague who's then looking at the video with you to give you feedback, we have these tools and checklists to help to ensure that the feedback is meaningful, accurate, and on point.
So we are going in this and going in some really interesting topics, but let's go back and talk about somebody that doesn't understand debriefing and what's a good step one. How would you explain debriefing to somebody that is not familiar or just not comfortable with it and may think they're doing some wrong things? So where would we start?
Well, I think we probably saw that, you know, in the infancy of simulation. Like, I think people just assumed they were good teachers and they would just be able to take teaching and apply it to the situation. And it didn't fit. because essentially, the learners would perform. They wouldn't really want to ask the learners what they thought of what happened. They would just be like, well, here's the things you did right and wrong, and I'm just going to lecture you.
Right.
And so I think it was very unidirectional. And I think that's what, at the start, what kind of rubbed people the wrong way. And I think then as people started to recognize, what, we're dealing with experiential learning here. Like part of that is asking learners to actually reflect on their performance, and, you can help guide them and facilitate them to better performance. I think we started to see that evolve. But the problem was in the field, you had both.
Yep.
And I think people really felt frustrated with that. Like, they'd come do a debriefing course. They'd get some tools to be a little bit more open, like using open-ended questions, being a little bit more just open to what the learner's kind of standpoint was. But then they go back to their center and they'd work with someone who was just like steamrolled them because they would just lecture.
Yep.
And so I think it's just the evolution of the art of debriefing, I think, has been so much about there's a lot of focus on the science and methods and all that. But I think part of the art is just like how to engage in meaningful conversation. So I think as a step one, it's just like, how do we become open listeners or active listeners? How do we take other people's perspectives in this, and how do we share the floor with them, so to speak? I think that's a big step one. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I think that first off, let's recognize that. And then following that, I think it is important to provide some structure and to have some foundational knowledge about the various different conversational strategies that exist. And so let's understand the importance of feedback. Let's understand the importance of learner self-assessment and engaging learners in a reflective conversation. And then let's understand the importance of focused facilitation, where we try to get at the underpinnings of learners' behaviors and why they did things the way they did. And with those sort of three key categories of conversational strategies, that I think forms a fairly solid foundation to build on.
So you mentioned going back to the facility, having somebody that kind of basically is continuing the old way or just isn't receptive. What advice do you have for that person that's maybe returning from one of your courses and is trying to, preach that out to other people that aren't necessarily receptive? What do we do to get through to those people?
If you have the answer to that question, I'd happily hear it. No, it's a challenge for folks out there. I mean, whether they might invite someone, even forget that being a simulation expert or debriefing expert, they might ask someone to just be a content expert or subject matter expert, but they don't come with that same tool set. So, or toolbox. I think it's important for people just to be able to, give each other feedback, and that can be really tricky. So you have to kind of be open to it. And so I think one of the things for, someone going back is, before our next session, I don't work with someone that traditionally has been a bit tough. Like maybe we need to just have like a conversation beforehand about, hey, let's try to make each other better. Let's give each other feedback. What do you think about that? Just kind of socialize that notion of like, let's talk about this after and we can give feedback. And I think it goes a long way by you putting yourself out there first, because they'll likely follow you. And then that way, you've had that engagement and that permission to, talk about kind of what happened and maybe give a little feedback.
So like debrief the debrief.
Absolutely. And I think that's a big part of it. And we're not all going to get better just by showing up at a conference, taking a workshop and going home and applying it. Like, I think you really got to be in that mindset of like, for growth, I've got to look at my performance and I've got to get feedback. And then we've talked about there's many layers or many modalities of feedback you can use, but I think people, they need that. And so, as a program grows, it's a slow growth. Like you don't just suddenly become a pure feedback program in a day. It takes some time, and you need good leadership, and you need people that are acting in the way that you want them to act, and, leadership that's going to walk the walk. And it's a process.
So a team approach.
Yeah, part of that team approach is having many people who speak the same language and are able to walk the walk and talk the talk, right? And so if you have one person who took a course and is coming back to change the way that debriefing is done within a program, it's really tough for that one person to be able to spearhead change. But if you have 5 folks from the same program who have learned all these concepts, have learned together, then they can work together to spread and disseminate the word within a program. And so what we've tried to do is within the Debriefing Academy and Academy Archive is make our content accessible to all folks from various different levels of training, regardless of their profession. There should be something for everyone. And so if you've got a large group of educators within a program that wants to all learn at once, we have various different ways of being able to offer that content that would hopefully suit their needs.
So actually on that note, you guys came onto my radar due to a close friend of ours that actually recommended you. And so I reached out to Adam. I guess it's been almost 2 years ago now. We've been trying to work some things out. Talk to us about the Debriefing Academy. What is it that you guys started? Where are you guys coming from? And then specifically, you mentioned a little bit of this. What courses are you offering? And is there something, what makes you guys different than everybody else?
Well, I guess first off, where it comes from these are things we've struggled with over 20 years of practice. Like, we both built programs. We both had the same fundamental need to establish a culture. We both had large teams with a lot of turnover, and we need to be able to train folks in how to facilitate simulation sessions, all aspects of it, which included debriefing. So these are things back in the day that just weren't a lot of. And so programs were really tasked with trying to figure this out on their own. And so we got some foundational training, and then we decided can't send everyone, for the same training. So maybe we need to develop some internal faculty development opportunities for our own people internally. And then I think as we've just evolved in the society and with our collaborators kind of all over the place, I realize this is a common problem. Faculty development is something that not a lot of groups think about or have the capacity to add on. So then Adam and I really thought there must be a better way that we can export all this experience and knowledge and work we've done. Like a lot of the papers we published in the area of debriefing, we just want to share that. And not so much just go read this, but that really pragmatic, come and learn how to do this. And so I think the evolution of the Debriefing Academy was really around how do we turn this opportunity to take all this kind of, knowledge and examples and experience and lived experience and expertise, and then, how do we share that with everyone out there? And so I think that was kind of at the crux of the Debriefing Academy.
Along the way, we've been very fortunate to have collaborated with folks from so many different institutions and countries all around the world. And together, we've really learned. We've learned some lessons, and we hope to share these lessons through our publications and now through the courses offered through the Debriefing Academy. One of the things I think that really sets us out is our faculty are truly global. We have faculty from all corners of the world. And with that, they bring a diversity of expertise and differing opinions that I really think helps to enrich the learning environment within our courses. And so within the Debriefing Academy, we have a couple courses that we're offering right now. The Master Debriefer course really teaches people the foundational and advanced skills and strategies necessary to bring their debriefings to the next level. And that's a really comprehensive course that teaches all the different conversational strategies, as well as how to manage more difficult debriefings, co-debriefers, managing your cognitive load, et cetera, et cetera. And then the second offering is a clinical debriefer course, which focuses on how you would go about designing, developing, implementing, and then evaluating a clinical event debriefing program to improve patient safety outcomes. And so that one's a distinctly different focus, more on how do we turn debriefings into a vehicle of change within clinical environments to really improve patient outcomes. And so that one, both are offered either online, or you can invite us to come to your institution and we can deliver it in person as well. And we do offer a service where you can customize courses and design and deliver private courses as well that are customized to your needs. And so those are the main offerings through the Debriefing Academy. And then recently, just last month, we launched the Academy Archive, which is our new and exciting service. It's a subscription-based service designed to allow content in an asynchronous fashion, so people can subscribe for 1 year, and then they get all of our courses on the website where they just simply log in, and then they learn at their own pace, access the content, which is provided in very short, bite-sized chunks, access it on their own time, finish the courses on their own time at their own pace, receive certificates. And the benefit of that really is allowing institutions to provide this information to their entire team of educators, be it 5 educators, 20 educators, 100, 500. They can all learn together at their own pace, and then the managers and the directors of those programs can ensure that everyone on their team has received the same type of training and knowledge.
And that's important because I know that I work at a company and I have sites all across the state, and trying to get people together to do training would be murder. So allowing them in 3 cities across that state to get the same training, that would be important.
One of the other cool things about the courses that Adam was talking about, especially the Master Debriefer courses, when we had to pivot in terms of COVID, we had to go from in-person training, just running courses, whether destination or, just in person in a venue. We had to go to online. And one of the really cool things about online, in fact, we haven't been like online's just persevered because a lot of people like that because they don't have travel budget. They don't have the time to go away for, 3.5 days to take the course. And so this spreads it out over like a number of weeks. So for that course, it's 7 weeks, 2.5 hours per session for 7 weeks. But what's really cool about it is the community of practice that gets developed in that is really cool. Like the learners end up being from all over the place and all over the globe even. Like it's just crazy some of the courses, like where some of our learners come from. And then the instructors are from all over the world. And there's just this richness of like, those opportunities to learn together. We have quite a high faculty to learner ratio. So we'll have like, for 24 learners, we'll have 8 faculty. Yeah, so it's like, here's the concepts. Let's try them out. Let's play with them. Let's do some small group exercises. Give you some feedback. You have to try them out. So, and it's funny. The course just seems like it flies by. Like when you do it, you think, oh, it's 7 weeks. And we love it as instructors because like people just get so excited and engaged in the product, and so we love that. So we just love those courses and love to teach them. And quite often we see people even in the expo hall here coming by to say hi, and they're telling us their experiences, and they're really excited, and it's good. It's a fun place to be.
I did an online course through a different organization a couple of years ago, and it was very similar to that, where it was all of us coming together from all over the world, people from Africa. I think there was one student from China, the rest of us, here in North America. And it's crazy how not only 2 of the instructors, but also 2 of my fellow students in that class have become friends of mine, and I keep in touch with them, and I see them at all these conferences when we go together and kind of catch up. If I'm running on something similar, I'll run those ideas by them. And so you do build those relationships because in those classes, like you said, it's 2.5 hours, you're still face to face. You're not cameras off. You're not just sitting back reading a book, listening to something. You're actually actively involved. And I know I talked to Adam about this probably a year or 2 ago. Is if I'm going to put people through this, how do I guarantee they're actually involved in it? And Adam said, don't worry, we won't let them hide from anything. They will be involved in this. You want to touch on that, Adam, and how you guys address that?
Yeah, of course we have certain expectations when folks attend our course, but we've been really surprised and pleased with how effective these courses have been over Zoom and in the virtual environment. We were skeptical at first, to be honest, but using small group breakouts, having a large number of faculty there to support the role play, providing individualized feedback, and certain other tricks that we use when we're on Zoom that helps to create a psychologically safe learning environment so people can really get out there and try things that they haven't tried before and be comfortable, failing and then receiving feedback and then getting better. And so we've been incredibly pleased with learning in that environment. That being said, we still enjoy learning in person. We like it a lot more, to be honest. But if we do something over Zoom and it allows us to have learners from all over the world and faculty from all over the world, then there's definite benefit there for sure.
Now, you mentioned you offer this at customer sites. You do it online. Do you guys have a facility too, where you host so many classes a year? Maybe when people come up to Calgary and do them with you at your facility?
Well, we have done that before. We don't have a facility, so even if we host a course at our home base in Calgary, we end up having to find somewhere to do it. We try to look for kind of cool, innovative spaces that are just create a great environment for people to feel relaxed in as they do the course. So over the past, 3.5 days is long. It's a long course, and so we try to make sure we have like good food there to eat and good snacks, and we take good breaks, and I think it's just part of it, creating a great experience for the people that are going to do that. Because I think if you're coming a long way to do that kind of work, and I mean the work can be heavy at times. I don't mean like it's challenging, right? You're challenging yourself to learn new things. I mean, even people that come with a concept of like, I know this, I use this method all the time. Like we want to rattle their cages a bit and be like, but why? Why do you use that? And like, what are the pros of that? What are the cons of that? What are the other ways you could do it? So, a lot of time, learners ask us questions and we're like, yeah, it depends, because it's always contextual. And so I think that's one of the things I think that sets our course apart is that, we're not married to one way of doing it. We're very thoughtful about all the different ways it can be done.
I love asking you, well, what model do you use? Well, I use this. Okay, well, you want to talk to me about that? Crickets. Well, I use this model and I use this methodology. I'm like, tell me about that. Nothing.
Yeah, I mean, we've learned from running workshops at this conference and other conferences over the last decade and a half. Oftentimes people will subscribe to one particular method or model of debriefing, yet deep down inside they have this urge to do things slightly differently because, one size doesn't always fit all. And so when we first were thinking about this and wrestling with this challenge and topic, that's really what led to the development of a blended method debriefing, the paper that we published called Pearls with Walter Epic. And what that does is it basically frees people up to blend various different methods, to use them thoughtfully and for a defined purpose, because those who use Pearls in a blended method debriefing can appreciate the value of the various different conversational strategies and then be thoughtful about how and when to use those various strategies.
Yeah, and actually, I'm glad you guys brought that up. So I just recently did a debriefing, in workshop in service with my own staff, and a lot of these guys come from EMS and helicopter EMS backgrounds, but not necessarily clinical education, like formal simulation backgrounds. And we used the Pearls framework, but also alongside, the standard gas and the plus delta, and that explanation that not everything works all the time, and finding the best of the three that kind of fits in there. And then, as you said, once we get those down, people are comfortable, then they can branch out and start adding other things into it. Starting with something small, and Pearls is definitely not small, but starting with something to kind of get started small and then build on that as they go. Is that similar to what you would recommend, of finding maybe a couple of frameworks, kind of getting comfortable with those and then moving on from that? Or do you have another approach that you would take to it?
It's kind of funny. I kind of see it like driving a car, right? All the cars do the same thing ultimately, but you kind of choose the ones that might have different features or different things that just resonate more with you. Maybe the language resonates more with you, or the way it makes you feel, or it makes your learners feel, or perhaps it's just, how other people in your organization, like what's comfortable for them. So I think a big piece of that is like they're all essentially doing the same thing. Like we cut it back to its base kind of layer. We're just trying to initiate learning conversations, right, with learners. And I think all of these things can do that, and they do it in different ways. And I actually love listening at them kind of compare and contrast between different ways of doing it, because whether it's gas or diamond model or after action review or any of the parts of Pearls, it really, at the end of the day, it's all different car types.
Yeah, we did a paper on that, I think, about 8 or 9 years ago, published by Taylor Sawyer, who led our group. And, the essence of that publication was, him describing all these various different debriefing frameworks and breaking them down. And essentially, it's various different ways to describe the same thing, which is you're leading into conversation, you're collecting some thoughts and reflections, you're diving into analysis, and then you summarize.
Yep.
Right?
How deep
it's what
and
you
what
do
are you
in
focused
between.
on?
It's what you do in between that really counts, and how you get them to reflect, right? How you get at those learning points, how you close those performance gaps, how you make the learners feel, and how much they're sharing, and how much they're exploring the interrelatedness and interdependency upon all their behaviors. So yeah, I think having general structure matters, and whether it's whatever you adhere to, whatever framework you adhere to, I don't really think it matters that much. It's how you go about managing the flow of conversation, how you're engaging your learners, how you're being mindful of your own biases, and when you're sharing your own opinions, how you're managing that piece really influences outcomes from debriefing.
So someone that is just getting into debriefing, what is the number one piece of advice you would give them then?
Yeah, it's a great question. Of course you ask great questions.
Well, and
you know what? I think it's just, have an open mind. And I think challenge your own notions. Like, even as, you see this, you were a learner yourself in simulation before you started, but it's like, you have this experience, and how am I going to get the most out of this? And how am I going to get the most out of figuring out what I did well or what needs improvement, and, how am I going to get better for next time? And I think that, having an open mind and being open to all these different kind of ways of doing it is really important. I think the biggest thing is just, for me, is just being a good listener, because I think so many of us are good at talking, but sometimes we just need to listen to what's out there. I don't know if Adam has any pearls.
Yeah, I guess my advice would be that you can't become an expert in debriefing overnight, and rather you need to view this as a journey, and along the way, you should seek out opportunities for improvement and continuously to try to learn and apply new skills. Right, and it's only through that, growth mindset that you'll be able to develop and implement these brand new strategies and broaden your toolbox.
So part 2 to that question is, now, what would you like them to avoid? What would you like to, when I'm starting, just getting into debriefing, what is some of the things you think are that we all do, but you need to caution, big caution sign?
It comes back to something you said earlier, David. I think it's kind of that blind trust in something, and just, asking someone why they do it and they don't give you an answer. Like you talked about there being crickets, right? I mean, that's what it boils down to. I think that, you come to a conference like this, there's so many different people doing it so many different ways. They all sound awesome, but just knowing that they're all good. And like we said, it all gets the same thing. So I think for me, one of the things is just, this idea that you have a method, and, we see it a lot. I'll tell you, we see it a lot with kind of people that use plus delta. Right? Because plus delta's essence is pretty easy, right? You ask you two questions. What do you think you did good? And then what do you think could be done better next time? But what the problem sometimes they get into is they get a list of things. It's great at generating lists, and all of a sudden they're stuck. They don't know what to do next, right? So great, we have two lists.
I've gathered the data. Now what do I do with it?
Absolutely, right? And so I think that's a big part. But, people just like, I'll talk to facilitators, even really experienced ones. They'll be like, well, all I do is plus delta. I'm like, but when you unpackage it with them, they realize, they're missing on these opportunities. And, they might see something on the list and be like, wait, that doesn't make sense. I think that's on the other side of the ledger. Or they'll be like, wow, that's an interesting thing they said. Why don't, I got to know more about that. But the thing is they don't arm themselves, as Adam said. They don't like just search out opportunities to like use other methods to kind of like enhance that understanding, I think.
Yeah, I think one of the greatest pitfalls is early on in your career, if you're too rigid, you don't have an open mind. So you learn something and then you adhere to it so strictly at the expense of other things. And so I would encourage folks to keep an open mind, because over time, the landscape changes. New things happen. New things are introduced. I mean, even for us along our journey, we've learned new things and things that we weren't aware of or understood 5 years ago. Now we have a better appreciation, and now we sort of built those tools and added those tools to our toolbox. And so many things out there that we haven't been exposed to yet, even in the fields of like counseling and psychology. They've been doing this for many, many years, decades before us. Why aren't we learning from them more about how you go about counseling folks and how you go about, doing therapy? Like, I'm sure there are conversational skills that we can take from them and apply in debriefing. So let's just keep an open mind. And through that, I think we can all evolve and improve over time.
And that's a really good point, because in simulation, we always get compared to the airline, the flight industry, because they've been doing it longer. Well, that's a good point of another industry that's been doing it, and we should be learning from them. That's a great point.
We've seen that evolve in even some of the newer techniques that we've kind of gained familiarity with. So I'll give you one example. It would be something we call circular questions, right? Relatively new to the simulation game, first published, I think, in an article by Michaela Kolbe out of Switzerland. And, it comes from family therapy. And when you hear it being used, it sounds like family therapy. But then when you think about it, sometimes in simulation, it feels like we're doing family therapy with some of our groups. So it's a natural fit. And at its essence, you're like, wow, it's a new challenging way of looking at things. But, we, over time got familiar with it, tried it out, learned lots from mistakes. And, now I don't know for Adam, but I as a technique, as a conversation technique, I love that technique. And it works so well. And again, you've imported this from somewhere outside of, healthcare. And I love that.
Yeah. Hey guys, this has been wonderful. I think this is probably my favorite episode we've done in a very long time. It's very eye-opening. Any parting thoughts? Anything that you don't want to leave not on the table before we take out, or they don't want to leave on the table, I should say?
Got to think about that one for a bit. I mean, I think, just reflecting on my personal journey, thinking back 20 years ago where I started and where I am now, I mean, I just think the one thing that I've learned the most is that you never really know what's coming. And it really, really serves you well to keep an open mind, to be open to different ideas, different people's perspectives. And if we can really learn from others, that's when we can help to drive and innovate. And so that's what we've tried to do with the Debriefing Academy and the content that we offer, the courses we developed, is to really try to keep an open mind and bring in ideas and thoughts from other people all around the world, different cultures, new research, new innovations. Artificial intelligence obviously is a hot topic right now. Think a little bit about how we can build that in. And with that, I think, we can truly start to drive change and make the impact of simulation even that much more profound.
And I guess for me, it's just this evolution of, debriefing is a complex thing, and you can't distill it down to some kind of a science where you just do like a cookbook, do this, then do this, then do this. It's highly contextual. It depends on a lot of things. It depends on your environment, depends on your learners, depends on who they are, their experiences, their biases, your experience like this. But that's what makes it so great. It makes it kind of scary. So going back to how we started this, David, but it's once you can get some experience and expertise and comfort with it, like I just think you'll just like your mind will be blown, because you're just all of a sudden you're having these really rich conversations with people. And quite frankly, I do a lot of admin type work now, and I find I use the same conversational techniques in my boardroom meetings. Like I'm trying to figure out people's frames, and I'm trying to figure out what they know and don't know, and how I'm going to fill those gaps. And so it's so similar.
I love on the floor, I've seen conversations, and I'm sitting here looking at a careful conversation between two people, and I'm like, you're using debriefing skills. And I've had that times where I've been like, pull him aside later. I'm like, you were debriefing. He says, could you tell? That person couldn't, but I could.
Well, I can tell you now, my wife and kids know, and they come after me because they're like, don't try that Jedi mind stuff on me, is what I hear. So,
well, you mentioned earlier, like, body language, and sometimes we don't even know our own tells. I'll tell you right now, my wife knows mine before. She'll tell me I'm frustrated before I even realize it myself, right?
Right.
So yeah, absolutely. And it's easy to talk about our families, but we spend a lot of time at work too, and so your coworkers know that. Sometimes your learners know that, and so being careful not to share too much, on my face or when body language, you have to be mindful about that. Gentlemen, I'm beyond excited we were able to do this. So your course is one of my professional goals for this year. So I'm hoping to see you guys again here at some point in the next few months. But thank you so much for coming on. We really do appreciate this.
I would really like it if you would come back and maybe even make this a series, because debriefing is one of those 800-pound gorillas in the room that people don't necessarily know how to approach, or some people think they know really how to approach it. And you watch it and you're like, go to these people, talk to them. So if you'd be willing, we would love to have you back sometime, because I know it would help the listeners.
Yeah, that'd be wonderful. Yeah, thanks so much for the opportunity, guys.
Yeah, thanks for talking to us today. It's been fun kind of unpacking this with both of you. So thanks.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. Well, for the SimGeeks Podcast, we're your hosts, William Belk and David Shablock. Thank you very much for listening, and we will see you soon.